Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Dykes, and today I am joined by JP Mason on a Celtic State of Mind. It's 12:30, it's Thursday, it's the Bulletin. JP, how's your week been, mate?
Yeah, good. Just enjoying the fact that we got another 3 points at the weekend. That's been filtered into my week since Sunday. Obviously made it to the Tony Macaroni. I was determined to go, as I said last week, and I managed to move things around to allow me to get there. And I have to say, as soon as I got there, I had a good feeling. And I said it to my mate Nelly. I was like, I think we're going to do it today. And he was a bag of nerves. And I don't know if it was because I was still drunk from the night before, but I was at a stag do on Saturday, an all-day stag do on Saturday in Edinburgh. And somehow, despite getting home at 1 a.m, got up for 10 a.m. and was doing Livingston for 11.
You are a trooper, You are a trooper. I've seen you travelling down from up north and making it for the 12:30 Bulletin on a Thursday, JP. But you're always talking and make me a bit jealous because you've got a far better social life than me because you're always out doing stuff and I'm in here.
I all just gave it once at that time at the weekend. There's been barren spells, don't worry.
Well, we'll of course talk about Livingston because we've had a wee bit of time to digest the performance, both as a team and of the individuals that were reintroduced into the side. We'll be having a look at whether or not he's going to go with something similar against Dundee United, or indeed if it's going to be a scenario between now and the end of the season, JP, where Ange picks horses for courses, and it's getting to the stage where it's difficult even to say what is the strongest 11. I think we've all got our own strongest 11 in our mind, but it's almost as if we are looking at each individual challenge and encounter and picking a team to suit. Plenty of other things to talk about. Our current form, of course. We'll also be looking at some of the moves with a Celtic kind of tinge. Celtic-related moves. Neil Lennon has a job. Scott Brown doesn't have a job. And of course, we'll look ahead to the Dundee United game as well. But there is again, it's become something of a tradition, JP Mason. There's a Celtic jersey over your right shoulder. And I want you to tell me, as I always ask, what does it remind you of? When I look at that, who does it remind you of? There's one game in particular that springs to my mind.
I don't think we wore it that much, to be fair. I remember getting it from the Celtic store that used to be on Sauchiehall Street, and the sale, the end of season sale. It was in the sale rack, and I always love a long sleeve strip, and was delighted to get a long sleeved number of that. And I guess it just reminds me of like Commons, Samaras, Hooper, I guess as well. I'm trying to think of the game you're going to be homing in on, and I can't think. It must be. Is it Kilmarnock? No, it's not Kilmarnock. We wouldn't have worn that at Kilmarnock.
I think we did, mate. Did we not wear that in the 3 each game?
Oh, really? Is that?
Well, that's the game I'm thinking about, but I'm just double checking it because I'm going to correct myself before somebody else does. Yeah, we did. We wore that in the 3 each game. 3-0 down at half time.
Game in Celtic's history. Who knows how things would have gone had that not been turned around?
Well, the man in charge may have lost his job. He's admitted that. 2011, 11 years ago. Wow. And we will be talking a wee bit about Neil Lennon and the fact that he has a new job. He's had to travel over to Cyprus after a year out of the game following his departure from Celtic. But before we talk about ex-managers, let's have a wee chat about Ange, because during the week there, in fact it was yesterday, Kevin, Brian and Natasha had a very good discussion about how he has shaped our Celtic state of mind after 50 games in charge. And of course he's been doing some really good interviews recently, and I think it's no coincidence that some of the best interviews he does is with his fellow native Australians. He just seems to warm to them a wee bit more than some of the interviews that he does over here. And the latest one, I've got to say, JP, was pretty hilarious when you consider the Alan Brazil take on Ange when he came in. I mean, no matter how disappointed people were in the way that the club was being run at that time, and I make the point, I never did say, and I don't say disappointed that Ange had been given a job, because that wasn't the case. It was the way the club were dealing with the fans, the managerial situation we had, how the whole thing. Nobody on this podcast came anywhere near the reaction of Alan Brazil on that radio show. I mean, that was disgraceful when you watch it back.
It was, and he's made himself look really foolish, and I think that's always the thing you've got to be mindful of when you're talking on something like this, or like, you know, on national radio. You know, you need to sort of be mindful that things can come back and bite you. You know, and maybe I've said maybe things on this that make me look foolish now, but with regards to Postecoglou, I don't think I ever said anything like, "Oh, he's a dud. This is a waste of time." You know, there was never that level of negativity. There was huge question marks because it felt like the Celtic board were playing pin the tail on the donkey in the dark. You know, like we didn't know whether they'd done any due diligence, and we didn't really have any reason to sort of believe that they had done any. You know, because everybody was completely disillusioned with the club at that time. The way that that last season unravelled. I'll always say that there was mitigating circumstances for that, and there was, but we didn't help ourselves with the way that we went about our business with regards to everything that was going on. So, you know, to get somebody in like him who has, like you say, united the support, because everybody was all over the place, weren't they? There was nobody was singing from the same hymn sheet. They hadn't all been together in a ground for an entire season. So you've got that whole kind of psychology of coming back into the ground and feeling a little bit displaced and a little bit kind of like, this feels weird being back here. Mm-hmm. So you need somebody at the helm that can unite, and he did that straight away, almost maybe not straight away, but certainly within the first 4 or 5 weeks, you were getting the vibe from him that he kind of knew what he was doing, and then you started to see the European results in terms of you know, the performance against Midtjylland was a big marker for all of us. I think when we saw that, and we were like, wait a minute, we're not that far away here. But for Nirbiton's petulance, we might have got through that tie.
Yeah.
Who knows?
They took us to extra time, JP. You know, when you watch it back, we were miles off where we knew Ange was hoping to take us, but we did almost scrape through it. And the one disappointment when I look back on these games, as well as the Beaton sending off, because you expect so much more from him. And I mean, you just need to look at the tagline. Today, we're looking at experience. Beaton's going to come into that potentially when we face Dundee United. You don't expect it from him. But we line up against Midtjylland in the second leg with Dane Murray, who, by the way, I thought played really well that day. You know, he came on as a sub that in the first leg as well, didn't he? But he makes his first start for Celtic in the second leg. But what frustrated me is we had a player in Edouard up against Sviatchenko, and we didn't know how to unlock that defence. And that I found totally bemusing, because we had all the stats on Sviatchenko from his time at Celtic. We knew his weaknesses. You know, you would have known it intimately because we were keeping that kind of data, JP. Yet, Edouard, who was meant to be our, the jewel in our crown, he couldn't unlock that defence.
Head was out the door, though. We all know that. Like, he was already, thinking about where he was going to go. The move might have even been signed, sealed and delivered at that point, but just not announced, There's certainly been conversation, put it that way, because it wasn't that long after that he did go. What would be interesting would be to see an Ange Postecoglou side now taking on a Midtjylland side now, like that. I think that would be fascinating to see what would happen and how, and you talk about having the stats on the opposition. Well, look at the stats that we've got to provide for the evidence of the arsenal that we have now in terms of Jota, Abada, Kyogo, Giacomakis. There's a lot of firepower up there that are all, as I've always said, hungry, and they want to make a mark at the club and put their hands on silverware, because they're not the ones that have lifted the quadruple treble. They're not the ones that, I know that Rogic has talked about the experience of being top of the pile for the decade, but there's only a handful of those guys left. The club itself, yes, but there's only a handful of guys left. So all this new breed are all wanting to taste that.
Yeah, and it galvanises them as a team. You imagine going into next season with that under your belt. We've already got one trophy. When we get to the Dundee United part of this show, the segment of the show, when we look ahead to the Dundee United game, we'll be asking the question, do you dare to dream of a treble? I mean, that seemed so far removed from the expectations of quite a lot of Celtic fans at the beginning of the season, JP. We asked the question on the ACSOM podcast on a daily basis, and I always go back to Kevin Graham, who tempering the enthusiasm, saying if we're in touching distance by Christmas, we're now in March, we're midway through March, we're top of the league, we've got a cup in the bag already, we're coming up against Dundee United in the quarter-final on Monday night of the Scottish Cup. Are you going to that game, by the way? You got a ticket for that?
I haven't at the moment, and it's probably looking grim. I don't know the figures of what we've been allocated for the game, but I know that they've reduced the allocation again, and fair play if they've reduced the allocation because their home support are going to sell it out. No problem with that, but I would be borderline, over a boiling point if I see big patches of orange seats on Monday night, whereby you could have accommodated Celtic fans and have not, because we can go back to the Alan Burrows part or whatever, that's fine, but it's a Monday night cup game. It's a Monday night for a start, so not everybody's going to be as available as they normally are on a Monday night. So you want to maximise. It's obviously going to be on the TV. You want to maximise that surely for what you can. And I honestly don't think I've been to Tannadice for probably about 10, 15 years, something like that. I mean, if you think about how long they were down for a number of seasons, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And, so prior to that, you're looking at sort of, Tony Mowbray's tenure,
right?
That kind of time. Mm-hmm. And maybe even before that, I need to check my my very geeky ticket collection to see when the last time I was there was. But I was just like, Tannadice is a great ground to go to. It's proper old school. Feels like you've gone back in time a little bit because there's not been that many upgrades made to it or whatever, So,
mate, it's not for me. It's not geeky. Keeping all your tickets and everything, because over the years I just have given everything away. Honestly, the amount of stuff, just giving it away, and now you're kind of thinking, I wish I'd kept that, especially now that the wee man's shown an interest in Celtic. You wish you could have, but there you go. So no, you're right to have kept all your gig tickets and all your game tickets as well. You mentioned Tony Mowbray there, and you mentioned the era of a manager. You instantly start thinking of certain players, certain moments that define the manager's career, be that good or bad. And I'm thinking of Tony Mowbray, and I think there's two moments within that particular tenure that are maybe under the radar and in isolation wouldn't have made a huge amount of difference. But I think when you understand that there were two players within the Celtic squad that Mowbray did not want to sell, and they were sold. Following discussions with Peter Lawwell at the time, one of them was, remember Danny Fox?
Yeah,
brought him in, the left back. We brought him in, and we very quickly done our turn on him and made a profit on him. Another one was Massimo Donati, who started finding a bit of form under Tony Mowbray, but as soon as he did that and an offer came in from Italy, Celtic sold him, despite the fact that Tony wanted to keep him. So I think what happened is the club got away with it with Danny Fox, and they thought they could just do this, and they've done it again. And obviously it's quite undermining of a manager, isn't it, if the players have been sold from under your nose. However,
as well. Like weaken in the squad as well, because I think Danny Fox kind of maligned in Celtic supporters' memory. Like, I mean, if people are watching this, it'd be interesting.
What was your thoughts on Danny Fox?
What if people just go, shrug their shoulders at, it wasn't that special, but I remember thinking he was actually pretty good. I mean,
he got a cap for Scotland.
Oh yeah, I did. But I remember thinking that I was quite happy with him as a first team player. I remember him having any absolute howlers or anything like that, and he's gone on to have a decent career. And he's even still playing.
I'll check that while we're talking and just pretend that I know where he is. But I know that he eventually did play for the likes of Nottingham Forest, didn't he? and he got capped for Scotland, etc. I do remember him being kind of looked upon as being a bit of a dead ball export. He was actually playing in India until last season, and it looks as though he's actually retired now at the end of last season. There you go.
I'm sure he had a song. He even had a song which is more than James Forrest has got. I mean, he was only there 5 minutes and he had a song. It was pretty basic, but I think it was just his name sang over and over
until it fades.
Yeah,
we'll certainly be talking about wee Jamesy Forrest. So, if we're, what sparked that was mentions of Tony Mowbray. So we're talking about the age of Ange and the way he's gone about his business. He's come in, he's very quickly assessed the squad. He's managed to find a couple of nuggets in there that other managers maybe had overlooked. JP, they were maybe on the scrap heap. And he has managed a recruitment drive, which has been one of the most impressive in recent times. I mean, normally, if you bring in that volume of player, you think, right, quite a few of them are going to be flops. They're not going to hit the ground running. But I just think a really high percentage of the guys that have come in, and it had to be the case for this to be a success, have actually slotted in very, very quickly. And I think that's been key. So what we're talking about, things not going right before Ange came in, one of the big parts of that was the recruitment. But how right have we got the recruitment since Ange's arrival?
I mean, pretty much spot on from the keeper right through the team. There's not many of the players that you would want to see sold in the summer. If anything, the two loan players we want to retain, and we're obviously going to sign Maeda as well, which I'm absolutely fine with. This fraud tag that was thrown at him by that guy next to me, pops up on Sunday, scores that first goal. Such a crucial goal in the game, like the Carter Vickers goal against St Mirren. That was the game that we needed. That was the goal we needed to sort of calm everybody down, and we got it so early, and especially after the penalty miss and the pretty not open goal, but it was almost a sitter of a header from McGregor, and when he gets that on target, it's a goal surely. So the Maeda goal was huge. So going round the side with the signings, I don't recall ever having brought in that level of player, and two, them to have all contributed in the way that they have done. And I'm sure we said last summer these signings have to be right. Like you said, they have to be right. We cannot make the same blunders in the transfer market that we have done. Certainly last season, Ayete, Barkas, Fallon Golly, Shane Duffy, John Joe Kenny. I know that all these guys have now come out with there's mitigating circumstances around. We know of the mitigating circumstances around Shane Duffy, who's back now playing first team football for Brighton in the Premier League, and by all accounts doing all right. John Joe Kenny starting for Everton, which is insane. Nobody in their right mind would have said that watching John Joe Kenny for Celtic. If you'd said to them, he'll be starting for Everton next season under Frank Lampard, they would have laughed at you because his performances were nowhere near up to scratch. But he's come out and said, I was having problems while I was in Glasgow. It was a difficult time for me personally. That doesn't get taken into consideration sometimes. Hopefully it will now on reflection. I mean, there was a lot of people, myself included, were like, this guy's not good enough. But we're under a really, really tense, pressurised situation where every result was being scrutinised and every point was a prisoner. So we had to get the signings right, and absolute full credit to everybody involved with those signings who's scouted the players, whether it's a mixture of luck. Postecoglou's Japanese influence has obviously come into it. They would never have been anywhere near Celtic without Postecoglou, so there's that part of it. But then the rest of the signings, the Carter Vickers, Jota, Starfelt, who was amazing on Sunday as well. There'll still be comments and on YouTube just saying, you're always sticking up for Starfelt. He's got a mistake in him. He's a bomb scare. He's this. He's that. He's like, well, no. He's kept the opposition's attack out of our goals. for however many games now. He's looked so solid. He was a strong contender for man of the match. It was between him and probably Near Beaton on Sunday for me. But the signings all across the board have we're sitting here, and I remember saying back then, we'll look at the stats at the end of the season, and one person that hasn't properly contributed, and the one that I said we need to assess and weigh as to what he's given us, is James McCarthy. Because we all spoke about the James McCarthy saying, and I said something at the time like, well, if you're sitting on 30, 40 games come May next year, then that will be a successful signing. But that hasn't worked out. That's the outlier, the anomaly, amongst all the sort of the good ones.
Yeah, and you know what? Because I said that I thought he would come good, I'm pretty sure that'll be brought up once or twice come the end of the season, even if we're celebrating a treble, and at that point it doesn't really matter anymore. But yeah, you're right. I think when you look at the signings, that's the one. There was a couple of others that you know, there maybe were brought in more as development signings, but they were in that strange place now between the first team and the B team that if you're not getting a game for the first team, you're not playing. And that was the two boys from Sheffield Wednesday, who I think, you know, the loan deals were the right thing for them. Get them out, get them game time, let them play and develop until perhaps, you know, there is an opportunity back here in Glasgow for them. Chancellor, welcome back to the show. You are watching on YouTube. Anyone out there who's watching, you haven't done so already, there's plenty of you. Get yourself subscribing. You know, 65% of our audience doesn't subscribe to the show, JP, so click the button, get subscribing, loads of big content coming on the channel. Afternoon, ACSOM. They say there's no substitute for experience. Well, I would agree with that, JP. They also say young Les can run all day and have no fear. So for me, a mix of both is better. We will be talking about how Ange is going to face Dundee United. Will he go with some of the more experienced players that were drafted in against Livy? One of the big things I would say, you mentioned McGregor there, missing the penalty, and then I think about a minute later, missing that header. And one thing, blame the mask, blame that 25% vision that you're losing. Absolutely. One of the big question marks at the beginning of the season, it was around leadership, and who was going to take the captain's armband from Scott Brown. It would seem that there was absolutely no doubt in Ange's mind at any point that it was going to be Callum McGregor. I think he has taken to that role brilliantly. There's been so many examples, JP, you know, the one that was pointed out, I think, by Chris Sutton before the Rangers game, where it just showed you how influential he was with his teammates, a new group of players, and how influential he was. But I think what we've got now is we've got quite a few leaders. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the season when we were having this discussion, I liked Chris Ayer. I thought he was a leader. I didn't think he was completely... It was guaranteed. It turns out that it was guaranteed that he was going to leave the club. He's one of the guys who never played under Ange. You know, Christian Edward did play some games. I thought he was a leader. We lost him. We lost Scott Brown, another leader. But what we've got McGregor as the captain, but I also think we've seen a lot of leadership in guys like Near Beaton. James Forrest in a different way. He's not a screamer or a shouter, but he leads by example, doesn't he? And I think even Tommy Rogic, I think that, you know, with his experience at the stage of the career that he's at, that when he plays, he's obviously a senior pro, but we've also got a leader in Joe Hart as well. So we've gone from wondering and worrying who the captain's going to be to having a good sprinkling of leaders throughout the squad.
Yeah, definitely. I think the experience of when you saw the team sheet on Sunday, there was obviously quite a few people online sort of retweeting it, going seriously, like question mark, and I didn't look at it and go, oh no. I looked at it and thought, I genuinely. I mean, it's documented on another podcast. I was confident before the game. And really thought that we were going to do the business because of the experience, and also because I'd heard that we'd been training on a plastic pitch, so they'd been getting used to it, and you know, acclimatising. Which Chris Sutton was really critical of us not doing that ahead of the Bodo game and training on the park. I don't know if that would have made a difference. Had you know, with the team that we put out, I don't know if that would have made a difference. You know, over there or not, probably not. But certainly there was something about Saturday that just the players didn't look like they were, running in glue. They looked like they'd already played for half an hour on the surface before the game kicked off. They were already at ease with the ball. And, Rogic in particular, I heard Marvin Bartley on Clyde, I think it was last night, talking about how great Rogic was. He's obviously got a great view of him from the dugout. Maybe hasn't seen a lot of him in recent games. Maybe watched the games that we've watched where he's not played that well, and then all of a sudden he comes to life against them at the Tony Macaroni and really shows his experience, like you said, and his undoubted skill and strength as well, because he was brilliant on Sunday. And those are the players you're looking to step up. And James Forrest, the much maligned James Forrest, you saw his celebration. Didn't look as if he was over enthused with the Celtic support, even though he's not on social media, which is a good thing for him, I would say, because my God, does he get it tight on social media. He took his goal as you would expect James Forrest to take his goal, absolutely clinical, and he was all over the place as well on Sunday, being a real nuisance for them. And I just thought that, like the guy that commented there, Chancellor, said, the blend of youth and experience is probably something that Postecoglou will call upon in this running now towards the end, because these are the guys that have been over the course. These are the guys that have been top of the pile for the last decade. These guys can come in and show the others the way. I don't think that means that we're not going to see contributions, like huge contributions from O'Reilly and Hatate and everything else. But then that's why you've got a big squad, isn't it? That's why you can look at the bench on Sunday to bring on. To be able to, when have we ever had a bench like that in recent times? The last time we were at Livingston, we were looking to Nir Beaton to come on and change the game. I remember sitting there at the ground and looking at the subs warming up and going, my God, Nir Beaton is the standout guy on the bench. Now, that's not a disrespect to Nir Beaton, but it's only because he's not the guy that's going to come on and change a game. The guys that we brought on Sunday, Abada, O'Reilly, Hatate, these guys are all playmakers, can affect the game in a positive way as opposed to slowing it down. So that right there is the difference in Livingston. It's a pretty good barometer to measure Livingston the first time under Postecoglou and Livingston now. And Postecoglou made the reference to that as well, saying, the last time we sent the fans away from here with very little to cheer about. He says, I'm glad to be able to send them away today. And arguably a far more important game, because we're at such a crucial end. Back then it was like, well, we've got plenty of ground and time to make up points. Now we don't, because the games are running out, as the other team know very well.
They will know when the screw is turning. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Forrest, so let's speak a wee bit more about Jamesy Forrest. Like you say, the much maligned James Forrest. I do sometimes take surprise with the level, I think, of criticism when it comes to James Forrest. And I think leading up to the game, we actually discussed the fact that, let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago that he was making a decent contribution to this team. And the two examples I used was the goal, it was in Leverkusen, wasn't it, where Jota finishes it off. Forrest was instrumental in that move. It was from Joe Hart's kick out, the back heel. Brilliant. One of the best goals of the season Celtic have scored. Forrest was absolutely orchestrating that move. And then you look at the semi-final, the League Cup against St Johnstone, and you look at his part that he played in that game. That was this season. We're talking November time. And you think, well, he's not all of a sudden, right, lost it since then. And again, going back to something you said earlier on, you do learn pretty quickly when you're doing the ACSOM bulletins and that, JP, to choose your words wisely. So you're never going to go in, studs up and say he's finished. I don't think I've said that about any football Celtic player. But I also look at the fact that he is only 30. Now, that's nothing in modern football. And I know that people will point out the fact that he's had some really serious injuries in the last 2 seasons, and I totally get that. I just think his recovery is going to take longer. But no way am I writing him off. No way should that footballer spend any point of his career at any other club other than Celtic. He should finish his career at Celtic. And I don't know if he's going to be like Scott Brown and play until he's 36, or if he's going to be one of these guys that's maybe 34 due to injury, it catches up with him. I don't know. And a lot of his game, of course, is based on the speed, isn't it? So I totally get that he might not make it to 36. But it is the modern game. Players are playing longer. I'm not ready to write him off. And I think that was another reminder for a lot of the critics, JP, at the weekend, that, he's not finished yet. He's not finished. He's in his 13th season. He scored league goals in every one of these seasons, that was pointed out, and a remarkable record, 19 trophies. He's going for 20 and 21. Dare we dream about the treble, 20 and 21 this season. But I did watch his celebration because there was one of these fantastic Twitter pages that showed his first goal and his latest goal. First goal was against Motherwell, wasn't it? And it was a difference in the celebration that caught me. The fact that he looks like a young boy, which he was at the time, 17. But he barely celebrated. It was quite he played it down. What did you make of that, JP?
I felt terrible. I hate seeing that. I mean, folk will say, what does it matter whether he celebrates or not, or, he's still, getting paid thousands of pounds a week, But I don't like to see someone not being able to enjoy that moment, because it's going to have been tough for him watching in the sidelines, regardless of what you say about him. He's a Celtic fan, he's a Celtic fan. He's obviously loves playing football because he's still doing it. And, he's been on the sidelines and watching other people, grab the headlines and Celtic playing really well, and he's not been able to be a part of it. Comes in, scores the third goal, which ultimately proves crucial in the fact that they got a goal back. So, you don't want it to be 2-1 in that game going into the last 5-10 minutes when they've got so many absolutely massive guys in their side who all it takes is a foul in the wrong part of the pitch and a ball swung in and suddenly it's 2 each. That could have happened. There's no way you're telling me that wasn't a possibility. We were comfortable. We played them off the park. However, they were a threat all the time. Nubly, Obilai, there's others. There's a good 3 or 4 in their side that can. Well, they hit the bar with a header from a foul James Forrest gave away, by the way, just before half time. But Forrest putting that third in, that was the one that really kind of just put the game to bed, I think. And such a relief to finally win at that ground. Maybe it was a combination of relief, but I don't think so. I think it was a kind of, no, there you go. I can still do this. Have a bit of that and stop giving me it so tight. I don't know if he gets sent screenshots from social media. I hope not. I hope people aren't callous enough to send them those things. If they do, maybe it provides them with motivation to sort of to ram it down a lot of people's throats. I've been slagged for this on this before, but I really don't like seeing a tweet singling out a player for criticism that then gains traction on Twitter and becomes almost like everyone's thoughts. Like it invades people's thoughts to the point that it's like, oh, well, I saw that tweet and loads of people were liking that tweet, therefore I'm going to think that way. Mm-hmm. That's what happens on Twitter.
Absolutely.
It's a weird, poisonous place to live sometimes. There's a lot of good things about it, but that side of things I really, really don't like at all.
No, it really is a mob kind of mentality, JP. And unfortunately, it's one that I have fallen victim of from time to time, and people do send me screenshots of the numerous people that have been blocked over the years that for some bizarre, strange reasons. So
it's coming from the own base as well. It's this is not opposition. This is within our own fan base singling out. I mean, if you do have a criticism of a player, fine, have that and maybe have a conversation about it. But to put it online and to make it so, it's almost like magnifying it and putting it in lights. I know, and as soon as it gains that traction, it's just like, well, that starts to become a lot of people's thought processes based on that, and suddenly you've got Forrest equals written off. Oh, he's 30. He's past it. I'm not a fan of that.
I hope it continually proves that it's wrong. Yeah. I really do. Paddy, welcome back, Paddy. Sporting your ACSOM hoops, afternoon, PGD and JP. Hope you're all well, and we hope you're well as well. The Urban, and I cannot get this wrong after yesterday, the Urban Culture. Good day, fellow ACSOMers. That latest Ange interview is the best sports interview ever. Well, he has a knack of providing very good fare when it comes to interviews. And I love his honesty. I think when Ange is talking, what you definitely get is a bit of honesty. And I've touched on this a wee bit. Again, it's just a theory. I'll never be able to prove it. But I just think after the Hibs game, he was all about, I'm just going to throw a protective blanket over my team here and I'm just going to stand up for them. I don't care if you think they played rubbish. I'm going to tell you otherwise. And at that point, you're looking at a side, JP, that didn't have the experience that we're talking about. They didn't have that 9 in a row experience, how to get a league title over the line. And I made the point a few weeks back, some weeks we're lining up and only 2 players have had 50 or more appearances under the belt for Celtic. That all changed at the weekend, and I think it was the right time to change it. Go out there, bust the Livingston hoodoo, get that back on track. But I think overall, the manner of the performance was so positive as well. But a big part of that, I know we've lost games in front of 3 stands at Livingston. I get all this, but I don't understand clubs' mentalities where if they can't sell their tickets, and I think that's an important point you made there about Dundee United, if you can't sell your tickets, sell Celtic the tickets. Get the crowd sold out. And what an advert it is as well. Looking around that stadium and there's not a seat to be seen and it's sunshine and, Celtic, there's nothing better. It's a great advert for Scottish football. But I guess with the knowledge I've got of Scottish football, there's going to be loads of teams, probably more teams than not, who will refuse to do that moving forward, JP.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But the argument is that we had the 3 stands in the first game this season, and it didn't do anything for us because they snuffed us out. They nullified any threat that we posed that day. I actually was talking about that on Sunday, and I meant to look back at the lineup from that day just to see how different it was and who wasn't available and everything else. Because I'm pretty sure Kyogo was missing that day, and there was some other fairly, prominent players who'd been playing around about that time that didn't make the first 11. But yeah, the ticket thing, the only reason that I'm having a gripe about Dundee United is as if they have reduced that allocation and then subsequently don't sell out their own. Because I don't know how many Celtic fans normally would get into Tannadice, but with it being a cup game, surely there has to be, a minimal amount that they have to give us for the game because it's a cup tie. Because whenever teams come to Celtic Park, if we were playing Rangers in a quarter final or something at Celtic Park, we would have to give them X percentage of the ground or something like that. So I that's the thing. I don't see it happening a la Livingston. But like you said, it does provide an atmosphere, and it does probably give motivation to the opposition to go out and think, well, you've brought all these fans here. We want to silence them. And by the way, see when Joe Hart saved that shot early on, and he scooped down, there was no react. You know how you'd normally get a crowd reaction, if Joe Hart saved that at Ibrox or something like that, you would hear a massive, reaction to the save and the fact that it was nearly a goal. There was nothing at Livingston because then almost an entire ground was Celtic fans. So we were all silent to it. So it just sort of passed off as a kind of, oh, well, that was a save. But then you look back at it, it was an incredible save. That had it been in a neutral ground or whatever, it would have generated a kind of a noisy reaction from the home support. But he didn't get anything. That was a bit strange, but it was great to be there. I firmly felt that the hoodoo was going to get lifted on Sunday. I just thought it had to. We had to win by hook or by crook. But the fact that we won with such panache and piling on the agony, putting on the style.
The thing is, when you look at that run of fixtures in front of you, JP, and you say, right, in order to win this league, you need to go and do this. You need to go to a stadium you've not won in X amount, and it's one of these things, like you say, it had to be done. It didn't matter how long you just had to go and win that game, and it's exactly what they did. But interesting enough, when you mentioned the lineup from the previous game, I'm going to read it out to you, and there might be a few surprises in here. When they beat us 1-0 earlier in the season, the lineup was as follows: Hart, Juranovic, Bolingoli, Carter-Vickers and Welsh. Rogic, McCarthy and Turnbull, Abada, Ayeti and Jota. So that was the starting lineup, and that is quite the turnaround since then. There's a few players in there who I doubt will play for Celtic again. Bolingoli will not be, I don't think, representing Celtic again by the looks of it. David Bradley comes in on YouTube. Hope he keeps Forrest in. Needs the game time, says David. That's for the Dundee United game. Estepona boy, afternoon to all my ACSOM mates from sunny Estepona. Thanks everybody for joining us. We do appreciate everybody getting involved.
I've never heard of Estepona. I don't know where that is. I've genuinely never heard of it. I mean,
there you go.
Sounds Spain somewhere potentially.
It does, doesn't it? I'm sure is there a CSC out there? I'm sure there will be. Celtic bars will know. Magnet 67, afternoon ACSOM team. I think the players will be well rested and coach ready for United yet, and Ange will play the strongest team, of course. The question is, what is the strongest team? This is the big question. We were talking there about Jamesy Forrest. Another question around the striker, obviously. The big question mark at the moment is, do you play Maeda? Do you play Giakoumakis, who's now back from illness? JP, but let's have a wee chat about Maeda, because he's another guy that was coming in for a fair bit of criticism. He scores the opening goal, he wins the penalty, and he's the one that's putting Livy under the pressure when they score the OG. Mm-hmm. So, there's three big moments in the game, as well as everything else that Ange is telling us about. And promoting him for, because he does, close down constantly. You see the amount of times he tries to win the ball back in our half, and often he does, because he just has that burst of pace. I think he's a player who has come under a fair bit of criticism. My kind of view on him was that he must be some player if he was above Kyogo in the shopping list. He's only one of the 4 Japanese players who Ange has managed. And, you think of all the Japanese players that he's managed previously, and he's the one guy he wants to buy. So you think, there must be some player. And, maybe you're not focusing so much on the fact that there's not been a break between the Japanese league ending and the Scottish league, or his introduction into the Scottish league in January, and the fact that he's had international travel, etc., to play international games. And I think Maeda's doing just okay, to be fair. I don't think he's been as bad as a lot of people are making out. I think he's done pretty well, and he was a big player on Sunday, a big part of that victory.
Massive. I said when I was talking to Melly before the game, I was like, I think what he needs is a big goal, i.e. a good goal. Like, if he'd scored that over the shoulder volley. Remember we were talking about the David, against Belgium, which I did watch after we finished talking that day. And
what number was he wearing? Platt, because he wasn't our first choice, was he? What number was he wearing?
He wasn't our first choice on the England side. Really?
Did he come on as a sub in that game?
I just watched just a clip of the free kick going into the box, and it was in the last minute against Belgium. What an absolute screamer goal that was. But I was saying, if Maeda got a goal that got everybody off their seats and, was like, whoa, that's some goal Maeda scored, like that almost might turn a few people's opinions on him. I don't know. But at this stage of the season, I don't really care what kind of goals he scores. That was a 2-yard header following up from Starfelt, by the way. And yes, okay, it wasn't a corner, but my God, the amount of scrutiny over that corner kick. Unbelievable. Like, that is absolutely insane. Like, the way that Sports Scene went on about it as well, and oh god, online and everything. It was just from the other side, and oh my word, I've rarely seen something as as futile as that. Like get analysed to death. The Maeda goal, huge goal, 3-yard header, but he was there to score it. He went into the space that he knew that it would go to if the keeper got a touch to it. So his reading of the game is really good. And like you said, he came back quite a few times and nicked the ball either Livingston's centre half or midfield and started moves that could have led to further goals and probably should have led to further goals. So making judgments on players after however long is, go back to Henrik Larsson, like what were people, and I think somebody mentioned this recently, like what would social media have said about Henrik Larsson in those first, 6 to 8 months? It certainly wouldn't have been saying, that he was going to be one of the greatest players that Celtic's ever seen. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that Maeda's going to be that, by the way. I'm just saying that making a call on a player so early on, with such a small sample size, is just this. It's not. I think it's because we've been burned so many times by poor signings. But we should learn to trust the fact that this guy's been brought in on Postecoglou say so, and he's not got very much wrong on that front so far.
I think that's a big thing for me, is that if it goes through that filter, the Ange Postecoglou filter, and he's part of a signing, there is a massive level of trust there, because you do trust in Ange Postecoglou, because at this stage there's absolutely no reason not to. We spoke at the top of the show about the reaction of some people, the overreaction of some who should know better when Ange was actually appointed. And what I would say, because again this goes back to your point where people start piling on Twitter and then a myth becomes the truth. Mm-hmm. There was no big witch hunt for Ange Postecoglou on a Celtic State of Mind. And I've heard that mentioned time and time again on Twitter. That didn't happen. That simply did not happen.
Well,
and in actual fact,
watch what we said. You know what I mean? It's not as if it's like deleted videos or anything like that.
It's all there. You're right. And the thing is, JP, what we tended to do was say, well, what's my knowledge of Australian and Japanese football? Not great. Therefore, we'll get the specialists, we'll get the experts on the show, and we'll talk to them. And that's what we did. They were brought in as guests. And Jared continually comes in on a monthly basis now on a Friday and talks about the Australian take on Ange Postecoglou. I must admit, 3 defeats in 6 league games, that was a concern. That was a big concern at that point, and we spoke about it. At no point were the words Ange out ever uttered, but if you want to go into Twitter, apparently that happened, and it didn't. It simply didn't happen. And I think that's important to point that out. You were talking there about Maeda, who's come under a bit of criticism. Forrest, who's come under a bit of criticism. Starfelt, he's up there. He is up there when it comes to criticism. And again, looking at his performance there at the weekend, and I just thought to myself, he's been persevered with to the point where he's grown into that relationship that he has with, that partnership that he has with Carter Vickers. The one thing I want from Starfelt is a goal, and I think when it comes, it's going to be a big one. He's the only outfield player that's not scored for us that started that game at the weekend. Yeah. And I want a goal from him. If he saves it for Ibrox, I'm cool with that.
That would, again, like I said about Maeda scoring a quote unquote good goal, I think Starfelt scoring a goal against anybody at this point in the season when everything is so crucial, I think that would hopefully win over a few of the doubters, because it's absolutely. I started to feel like I'm losing my mind by the fact that I want to defend the guy, because I'm like, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? The performance levels and the way that he's keeping the back line together with Carter Vickers. It's so impressive, and it's so far away from what we're used to as a defence, because our defence has been shit. And I know everyone will point to Europe, I think you make a judgment on Europe next season. I think that this season was too soon for Europe, but yet we still made an okay fist of it at times. You know, Bayer Leverkusen away, you know, that we really gave them a run for their money. Betis away, we gave them a run for their money as well. Ferencváros, we righted the wrongs of the previous season by beating them home and away. Bodo Glimt is the anomaly. I'll be interested to watch and see. I'm more interested in the Bodo Glimt result tonight than the one in Ibrox. Because Bodo Glimt are taking on AZ Alkmaar in the Conference League. So I'd like to see how those two teams fare against each other and what Bodo Glimt do to them. Because as much as we got slagged for the Bodo Glimt thing, there are a lot of people have gone, wait a minute, have people not been paying attention? Neutrals are saying Bodo Glimt are actually a good side. You know, yes, okay, they play in a tiny wee stadium and people are hanging out of their bedroom windows with a pint watching the game. That's all very well and good, but they've got a good manager and they've got a good setup, and they've dispatched Roma at that same stadium by 6-1. You know, I mean, that you don't do that if you're just your stupid wee team that's named after the character for Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or something like that, which is a lot of the disrespectful part that was flung about at them. It just so happens that sometimes these wee teams come along and they've got their I was going to say something else there, but they've got their stuff together and they can make an impact, as we have done as a wee team. Because at the moment we kind of are still a wee team again in Europe. We went and beat Lazio home and away. You know, I mean, our past name as Celtic obviously meant that some people weren't that surprised at that, but that was a huge thing for us.
First win in Italy, you know, first time we've ever won in Italian soil.
Exactly.
Incredible. Now you've got a fan in Daniel who reckons you bring balanced and a clear perspective and reality to Celtic players and performance. JP,
well,
there you go.
I'm glad to be saying something right. I mean, just sitting here not having them talking to you about Celtic I don't think of myself as some all-seeing eye or better than anybody else or anything like that. That seems to have been fired about at people on this particular podcast.
We speak for an hour a week about something that we're both passionate about, JP, and that's what it comes down to.
The bottom line,
exactly. Kevin Graham, remember him? Mulgrew, yeah, I get what you're saying, Kev. Charlie Mulgrew definitely springs to mind when I look at that jersey over JP's shoulder. And on Facebook,
you've made that up.
Oh, that's the greatest. Facebook user reminds me of FC Sion away. And by the way, you've made that up is probably the best comeback now on Twitter for anybody throwing any nonsense about. Ryan Kelly, yeah, it reminds me of Stokes as well. And you know, Stokes is one of the guys that did not, I don't think, fulfil his potential, even though he reached the heights with Celtic. You know, by the time he leaves Celtic, he's still at that age. He's 27, 28. He should have achieved far more in the game, but he didn't. He left. And, you know, his career, I don't even know if he's got a club as we speak. But the manager of that particular game, let's talk about the manager of that game, Neil Lennon. He's found a job. He's away to Cyprus. I'm not going to say I knew that was happening. I didn't, but I did expect that to be the type of move. What I mean is, I didn't think his next managerial position was going to be in the UK. So he gets the job. He's over in Cyprus. What was your initial reaction to that, JP?
I'm pleased for him. You know, I don't wish any ill upon Neil Lennon. I don't blame him. The blame does not lie at his door for last season. I mean, he's partially to blame, no doubt, but I don't think you can just go, oh well, it's all his fault. He's to blame. Everything else, you know, and therefore, you know, I want to see the guy do well. Whether or not that is the right move for him, I don't know. It's a move as opposed to no move. I did read, I think it was Stephen Presley saying that they're pretty unforgiving out there in terms of how long they give you in a job. You know, like he you know, did all right in one job and then got a move maybe to another club, and then was given hardly any time, and then he was out on his ear. The patter that he had with a friend over there was like, "Oh, don't unpack your suitcase." That was what he said about it. So he was kind of saying that almost indirectly to Neil Lennon about don't unpack your suitcase. But I don't know. Cyprus is somewhere I've always been I've never been, but I've always been fascinated with it because my next door neighbours used to come back with pirate videos from Cyprus when I was a wee guy. I remember they brought back the Turtles film before it was out in the cinema, and they'd been in Cyprus on holiday. So that's what I think about.
The things you had to do back then. It's so easy for everybody now. Access is so easy now.
You just go online and download whatever.
You had to wait for your neighbour to come back from Cyprus to see it. Brilliant.
I know. It was so exciting getting to see the Turtles film before it was out in the cinema. It was quite a moment. But I did notice that, and I've been meaning to look up their gear, the Omonia Nicosia. That's the correct pronunciation, because they've got the shamrock.
Nice crest.
They've got the shamrock. So I mean, they might have some decent clobber, as has a Celtic State of Mind.
Lovely segue. A lovely segue. Yeah.
By the way, can I just say, no agenda. I was called in the text me and say, go and just sort of slyly bring up the fact that we've got new merch. That did not happen. It was completely natural there. So I happened to see the video like anybody else that follows the channel, and saw the video of the new merch, which looks fleeing. Some of the Kappa one in particular.
Bizarre. It looks so good.
I can't remember the name of their logo. Is it begin with an L?
Lomo.
Lomo.
Yeah.
That one. Cool.
See, the thing, I'm at the stage where I think stick a shamrock on something and it starts to look good, you know?
Yeah.
But what I loved, and I retweeted it this morning, was the band from Nottingham, The Chase, that were up doing a session. They're now bouncing about on tour wearing the Shamrocks trackies, which is tremendous. So keep wearing them, guys. That's what we like to see. So Neil Lennon is in Cyprus. Like yourself, we wish him all the very best. He's been out the game for just over a year, probably needed that time to recharge the batteries. It'll be interesting to see how it goes over there with Neil Lennon, but you know, as soon as he gets a job, people are talking about meeting them in Europe next season and all the permutations and everything that needs to happen so that Celtic meet. Listen, just wish him all the best.
The chances of that happening are surely very, very slim.
Very slim indeed. Very slim indeed. And in the meantime, coincidentally or not, Scott Brown decides to hang up his boots at Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Our once esteemed leader, Scott Brown. Where next? There's been some suggestion that he's going to go down and have a wee chat with Brendan Rodgers. Where do you see Brown's coaching career taking him?
I really don't know. I know it's public knowledge that he went for the St Mirren job, right? Like I said that to somebody recently as if like it was something that I just heard, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that everybody knew that." So he went for it, and Kevin Thompson went for it. Stephen Naismith as well. Was that?
All right. Yeah.
I think that was a thing, but so maybe the fact that Scott Brown was shown that he wasn't fully committed to Aberdeen by going for that job interview made Jim Goodwin make that decision, or they came to the decision together, or whatever. I don't like the idea of him not finishing the season as a player like that. It feels unfinished. It feels in the same way that he left Celtic. And by the way, he didn't run away from Celtic at the first sign of a challenge. He clearly knew that his game playing time was going to be limited at Celtic this season, and wanted to move elsewhere. And by the way, in those two games against Rangers, scored one and got a draw in both of them, which could potentially have an impact on their title challenge this season. So I don't subscribe to the fact that he's some sort of coward and all his medals don't mean anything because of this, that, and the next thing. Guy's unbelievable, and the people in the game that have spoken about him have said as much. I hated the way that it ended for him at Celtic last season, where there was those pictures of him in the middle of the park, you know, in an empty stadium. It was just horrible. That's not how he should have left Celtic. So, and he doesn't even get a farewell as Brunner from Aberdeen. You know, like it just walks out the door one day, and there's no Scott Brown in Scottish football as a player, but without any kind of. And he's probably not the type of guy that will care much about that. But as someone who's watched his almost every move in his career, and I'm talking about as a Hibs player, Celtic player, and now, I watched him at Aberdeen, to see how he got on, and for Scotland as well. It's just weird that he just goes out with this kind of whimper. It just doesn't sit right with me that's how it would play out. As for his next move, I would probably say that going and doing some recce work at clubs would be an idea for him, rather than just jumping straight in. I think if had he got the St Mirren job, I think that would have been a terrible idea. I think that would have been a false start. I mean, Aberdeen has been a false start for him as a coach, ultimately. Because Stephen Glass lost his job, because he was kind of hanging his hat on Stephen Glass doing well, and he hasn't, so he's become collateral damage to that. So I think he surely wants to be a number two somewhere before he takes it over a club, as in a number two with an experienced manager, and not someone, no disrespect, but not someone like Stephen Glass, who hasn't been through the rigours of season after season and X League or whatever. I think that's ultimately why Glass has fallen on his sword at Aberdeen, because he didn't have that experience, that clout. Jim Goodwin has been in the trenches as a AFL manager, and don't want to say that knows the game, knows the city or anything like that, but he has got his stripes here, so you would expect that he'd be able to transfer that to Aberdeen.
See, when you're looking at the way the progression of a player to the manager, if you like, I mean, we've spoken about Neil Lennon before. Neil Lennon's first managerial position is at Celtic. Jim Goodwin, I'm thinking of Doves, Jimmy Goodwin.
I know, you always say that, and I think of that when you say that about Doves.
Jimmy Goodwin. He did the whole Alloa, St Mirren, Aberdeen. For me, that's a good pathway, and Jack Ross has taken a similar pathway, Sunderland and Hibs. Paul Hartley looked as though he was taking a good pathway, but he's taken a step back maybe to take a step forward. But I share the kind of view that if you go straight in at that level, sometimes it's win or bust. You might not get that second chance if it doesn't work at Premiership level. Yeah, absolutely. And for a guy like Scott Brown, the iconic figure of Scottish football that he is, I hope it works out for him. Whether or not he comes to Celtic, and I know that's been a discussion point this week, if he's good enough, I love the fact that we've got that unbroken link to the very beginnings of our club, and we spoke about that from John Kennedy to Willie McStay, Sean Fallon, Jimmy McGrory, Willie Maley. Brilliant, love all that, but only if you can do the job. So if Ange Postecoglou doesn't want him at Celtic, fine. I trust Ange's kind of take on these things.
Definitely, the chat came up with, I don't know, it was another podcast or whoever I was speaking to about the whole backroom team at Celtic. Gavin Strachan, John Kennedy, and how they've been maligned or whatever. My only concern with them was that the manager that was in situ didn't want them. If Neil Lennon didn't want John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan, then they were an issue to me. If Postecoglou didn't want John Kennedy or Gavin Strachan, then they were an issue to me, because that's meddling from above, which is what we said at the start of this season was something that couldn't ever happen again. Was this they don't make the decisions anyway. The manager's got no say. The manager's a puppet. Doesn't have a say in the signings, doesn't have a say in his backroom staff. But he's come in and said, no, I've assessed these guys. I'm happy to work with them, as I have done at other clubs when I've worked with people that have been there. That they ceased to be an issue for me at that point, whether we were winning or losing. It's not about because we're suddenly like Gavin Strachan or like John Kennedy because we're winning football matches or we're top of the league. But it's because the manager wants them there. It's not that has to be, I think, clarified certainly for me anyway, because that's just what I think.
I would agree with that. Now, you have a programme
I just
from your shelf. Go and show us the front cover, mate.
wouldn't just pluck a random one. It's just because this is so old. This is from March the 10th, 1995. And, Lil Z on Twitter, who posts up the goals from the games, he posted it up, and I saw it this morning, and it was that night. I was at the game. I think I would have been there with John Green, my pal, who may be watching. Belated happy birthday, Greenie, by the way. We would have been at that game on a Friday night, probably with his big sister on the Bathgate CFC, and the lights went out, the floodlights went out. I don't know if you...
I was there, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. And there was a delay, and did the whole match, it did kick back off again, didn't it?
It did, aye. I remember that same season, though, there was an electrical fault.
Yeah, it is.
The man. There was an electrical fault before remember that season, and the turnstile stopped working, and there was loads of people locked out. There was an issue that season, I'm guessing, with electrics. And
that
wow,
brilliant strip, that, wasn't it?
See that strip though? Yeah. I didn't like it at the time. That's one of the ones. It's age. I think it's improved with age. Wasn't that Tosh McKinley's debut? He didn't wear the hoops on his debut. It was against Dundee United in the fog, and he wore the away strip. I'm sure it was.
The socks are cracking as well. Like, we've got the umbrella trim at the top.
Much underrated.
And that strip now, like, would probably cost you an absolute fortune if you were trying to buy an original of that. I know you can get the BHgate kind of Schneiders, but
that strip and the one behind you will be appearing in my forthcoming book on Celtic jerseys. There's another plug.
Due out in 2027.
I was due it about 10 years ago, mate, and that isn't even a over exaggeration. Is that Biggins? Oh, there we go. Oh, brilliant. Welcome to Nostalgia Corner with ACSOM. I love that. I love that campaign, even though we were at a stage, Fergus had taken over, but we knew that the biggest amount of investment wasn't going to be in the playing staff. So you've got Tommy Burns. See, the thing where people talk about rebuilds, a lot of the time people never mention the Tommy Burns rebuild. Mm-hmm. He had the biggest rebuild on his hands. People don't really mention that. They talk about the Wim Jansen rebuild or the O'Neill rebuild. Mm. What about Tommy Burns' rebuild as well, though?
I wouldn't have appreciated that at the time. I mean, I was, 14, 15 years old at that time. I wouldn't have been looking as intently as we are today about Ange Postecoglou's rebuild. I didn't probably pay attention to that. I would just be like, oh, we've signed somebody, or somebody's gone, or, I would never actually think of the bigger picture of what he was having to do. So I would be interested now to look back at this squad. I mean, the team probably that day was Bonner, Boyd, McKinley, O'Neill, Mowbray, Grant, McLaughlin, McStay, Van Hooijdonk, Falconer, O'Donnell, Walker, and Collins.
I'm going to try and remember the score. Was it 1 each?
1-0. John Collins scored. Yeah, because I watched that very grainy highlights on Little Z's Twitter this morning, and my God, does it look? I mean, it looks 27 years old. Oh my God, 27 years old.
Stop it, JP. Stop it, mate. Great memories, but again, big shout out to Tommy Burns, because for me, the rebuild he had on his hands was unlike anything any other manager has ever encountered. I mean, he was taking a club that was on its knees, and he was trying to rebuild the team whilst the club were being rebuilt, the stadium was being rebuilt. And although we did get, Van Hooijdonk in that first season, largely we were looking at guys like John Hughes, we were looking at Jackie Mack, Morton Vikhorst from Dundee, a lot of domestic style buys. Mm-hmm. The one thing Tommy should have done is sign a goalie. Should have signed a top class goalkeeper, and things.
That Bonner played in that game.
Yeah.
Wild to think that Bonner was still playing in 95.
The thing is, he had been freed. Bonner and Nicholas had both been freed the previous campaign, and Burns came in and re-signed them. And I remember the 94 World Cup, the only player at the 1994 World Cup who was unattached was Pat Bonner. He was not a Celtic player at that World Cup. Even though he had been a Celtic player the season before and he was a Celtic player the following season, he wasn't at that time.
But did you just get a phone call while he was out in the States? You're like, Packy, you fancy it for next season?
I know. But I do remember his name coming up on the graphics on the TV screen. Pat Bonner, unattached.
Oh, really?
Playing in the World Cup. Unbelievable. He was meant to sign for Kilmarnock as a goalkeeper, and then he comes back to Celtic, and he ends up playing in the cup final, doesn't he, against Deirdre?
Yeah.
Brilliant. There you go. We're just getting a wee bit nostalgic. We're forgetting that we're actually live here, JP. There we go. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for getting involved on all the social media platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. We are working on massive content coming your way. And on Saturday night, tune in to the Unplugged session, number 39. It's the 39th Unplugged session. This week, JP, is Nicky Lip, and I've already watched it. It is phenomenal. Tune in. You might remember Nicky from his days as a frontman of Sargent. He's playing Tuts a week on Saturday. Is it?
I played Tuts, headline in Tuts week on Saturday. Still tickets available. It's going to be a good night, I think, with Willie Doug supporting. And Nicky is a Dundee United fan, attends games regularly, including away days, and likes to sport a retro Dundee United strip. So one of us will be happy on Saturday night. Hopefully it's me. Hopefully
I hope so.
I mean, I know it's the cup and everything else, and it's not really what we're all about this season, but we've won one. We want to win another one, don't we?
Why not? I just say beware Liam Smith. Liam Smith is their weapon at the moment at Dundee United. But tune in on Saturday night. Thanks for tuning in again, and thank you once again, JP Mason, not JP Nelson, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.